Topping today's news, 3 men murdered over the weekend. We'll take a look at Sunday's national address by the Commissioner of Police, the official opposition calling for the top cop and the National Security Minister to resign, while calling on the Prime Minister to be a stronger leader. I'm Jcn Saunders. This is your JCN Evening News. It's a pleasure to have you join us. 3 people killed over the weekend. It started on Saturday night in the Pinewood Gardens community with 2 men shot to death, another one injured with injuries to the lower body. Police were alerted of the incident by shot spotter technology around 10 p.m. on Saturday at a residence on Plain Street, that's off Willow Street or Willow Tree Street, that officers discovered 2 injured men there. They were both unresponsive. They were at a residence, one in the front yard and another in the backyard, both suffering from what appeared to be gunshot injuries. A 36-year-old male was arrested shortly after in connection with this incident. On Sunday, a 26-year-old male believed to be Saron Barr was shot on Market Street, on the corner of Market Street and West End Avenue in the Coconut Grove community, an area where there have been several fatal shootings already this year. Preliminary reports indicate that shortly before 7 p.m., the victim was leaving a business establishment when he was approached by a male armed with a high-powered weapon. The culprit shot the victim multiple times about the body and made good his escape in a white Japanese model vehicle. The suspect was last seen traveling south on Market Street, then onto Bahama Avenue. These recent murders catapult the number of homicides for the year to 114. While there have been calls for his resignation, Commissioner of Police Clayton Fernandez seems determined to protect his legacy and clean up the Royal Bahamas Police Force. However, he admitted his shock when learning of the U.S. indictment of Chief Superintendent Elvis Curtis on drug trafficking charges while he was on a trip to Florida with his family. He said the news was more than shocking.
This moment was not just shocking, it was devastating. It cut to the core of the trust that the Royal Bahamas Police Force is meant to represent.
Mr. Fernandez revealed that during numerous meetings with various U.S. agencies since he became Commissioner of Police, he was never informed of the investigation, which some residents suggest says a great deal about the U.S. trust in local law enforcement.
At no time during my tenure did any of our international partners raise concerns about the activities outlined in the U.S. indictment. I have reviewed my meetings with agencies such as the FBI, U.S. Homeland Security, the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, Firearms and Explosives, the U.S. Drug Enforcement Agencies, and the U.S. Bureau of International Narcotics and Law Enforcement, as well as with the U.S. Charge d'Affaires. As recently as October 2024, none of these interactions highlighted suspicion about individuals or activities now under investigation.
Fernandez says he will engage former leaders in government and the police force to determine if they had any knowledge of the investigation or corruption and how they would have handled it. Additionally, he said the Royal Bahamas Police Force will fully cooperate with the U.S. investigation.
To ensure a comprehensive understanding of how these activities began and then remain undetected, I have already initiated consultation with key individuals who held leadership roles during that period. I have already spoken with former Commissioner of Police, Paul Rule. Additionally, I intend to contact former Commissioner Anthony Ferguson. In addition to former leaders outside of the force, I intend to reach out to former Prime Minister Hubert Minnis and former Minister of National Security Marvin Deems. I want to assure the Bahamian people that we will, of course, cooperate fully with the U.S. Department of Justice. And to date, we have not received a request to arrest the other individuals in the indictment. Also, we have not been given the names of any additional police or government officials who may be under suspicion.
The police commissioner noted that police departments in neighboring countries in the Caribbean as well as North America have had similar challenges with senior ranks of law enforcement agencies. He said the Royal Bahamas Police Force will redouble its efforts to stamp out corruption. On Sunday, the leader of the FNM, Michael Pintard, called for the resignation of both Minister of National Security, Wayne Munro, and the Commissioner of Police following a series of incidents with senior and junior officers either involved in corruption or criminal activities this year alone, and the failure of the Munro-Fernanda team to reduce the crime in the country in general, and in particular, violent crimes against women and girls.
The question is, do they remain fit to execute those jobs? No. The reality is that both the Minister and the Commissioner of Police are tasked with helping to coordinate stakeholders so that we are able to reduce crime in general, violent crimes in particular, and even more specifically, to reduce the crimes against women and girls. And their failure to assist this country in fact, reducing the very thing that they were tasked, they were hired to do, disqualifies them from continuing one more year, 2 more years in those positions. It is our hope that when the Commissioner speaks later on tonight, that among the various things that he would say is he would accept responsibility for his inability, and that the Minister, when he speaks, would accept his responsibility and for his inability to impact the portfolios which they have been granted, and that they would step aside.
Mr. Pintard said if the National Security Minister and the Commissioner of Police fail to resign, the Prime Minister must show strength of character and make a decision and release them from their duties as a result of their failures. And finally, in this segment, the official opposition called an emergency press conference on Sunday at the FNM's headquarters on Mackey Street. Party leader Michael Pintard accused Prime Minister Davis and his cabinet of falling down on the job and allowing the dark days of Bahamian history from the 1970s and 80s to repeat itself when the Bahamas was labeled as a nation for sale.
It is not a path that we should be walking down again. The reputation of the Commonwealth of the Bahamas is under siege, and the Bahamian people are losing confidence in the Prime Minister and believe that when required, he will not act. It brings us no joy in the Free National Movement to be here this afternoon to lament this tragic position we find ourselves in. Once word came down of the indictment, we all hoped against hope that finally our Prime Minister would have come to understand the crisis of leadership facing the Royal Bahamas Police Force, the Defense Force, law enforcement agencies in general, and of course those in the executive and the Parliament who preside over the public service.
Mr. Pintard said the Prime Minister's actions and inactions over the past 3 years has further undermined the institutional integrity of government institutions by failing to enforce existing accountability provisions in the law, which would have dire consequences relative to the country's reputation. Mr. Pintard accused Prime Minister Davis of being a weak leader.
But unfortunately, based on our Prime Minister's sad performance in the House of Assembly, it is clear to all who heard him talking about shaking the tree that he has offered the Bahamians no measures that would restore confidence. It is the same tired rhetoric, more of him pretending that he is outraged. He is ill-qualified to be a tree shaker. What we heard was more of the same. To the Bahamian people who are looking to him to provide clear leadership in the most crucial of moments, The Prime Minister demonstrated that he has neither the appreciation of the gravity of the situation nor the resolve to do what needs to be done. He is unprepared to make the tough decisions that he must know in his gut he has to make.
Mr. Pintard went on to set the F&M apart from the PLP when it comes to integrity and reform, admitting that the F&M not always perfect, but has consistently strived to fight against the lack of transparency and accountability in government. He said the Davis administration has failed to follow the rules of the Procurement Act, despite it being a critical tool for transparency. You're listening to JCN News. We'll take a break here. We'll be right back after these commercials.